Hello and welcome to the Center Daily Times live stream event previewing the 2025 Penn State football season. I am John Sauber, Penn State beat writer at the Center Daily Times, and I am joined by our esteemed guest, Audrey Snyder of InsideTheLions.substack.com, where you can go and subscribe and read all of her work. Audrey, how are you doing?
I'm good, John. How are you? Happy week one.
Yeah, unbelievable that this has already happened. The summer has been robbed from us again, and that we're somehow in week one already. But it's here, and it is probably the most anticipated Penn State football season in, I don't know, I would argue my lifetime, which I like to remind people started in 1995 to age them.
That's
But
the caveat, because I was going to say since 94. So
yes, I think 94 is probably the most anticipated, in the last, since the last national title, basically. But this rivals that, because this is the first chance, I think, that we can go into a season and say reasonably that Penn State can expect to win a national championship. I don't know that it's a guarantee, because nothing's a guarantee in the sport. I say all the time that, if you ask me to pick one team to win a national title, I would say that all of those teams, the answer is no, but you have to pick someone, right? Because it's just more likely than not that a team doesn't win a title. But Penn State is as well positioned as anyone. They have a loaded running back room. They have an elite offensive line. They have an elite defense. And I think expectations are reasonably high.
yeah, I mean, I think you look at it, it's really difficult to try and poke holes in this roster, right? I think everybody wants to point to the receiving core and say, okay, like that's one area where you highlight. You can get into the linebackers a little bit as well. But I think when you look at it from top to bottom, this is James Franklin's best roster. It's his deepest roster. I mean, I think we saw that this preseason when we're out at practices and you're looking around the field and you're like, okay, I mean, how deep realistically can they go at some of these spots? And like James Franklin said, I mean, you're looking at 7, 8 offensive linemen that they feel like they can win with. You look at the defensive ends, they want to have at least 5. They feel like they have 7. So I think that's, you look at some of these things and you're just kind of like, all right, there's a lot of good here. And I mean, let's be honest, John. I mean, you've got the next 3 weeks really of what I'll call preseason games, essentially,
Yes.
the way the schedule sets up. You have 3 cupcake games out of the gate, which you don't have preseason in college football. So this is pretty much that. I understand it. I get the scheduling. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, this is Penn State's best chance to get it done in a long time.
Well, and with how scheduling works, as we know, like these are scheduled years out. And I think this has worked out really well for Penn State to have these kind of soft launch games early, right? Like you can go into them and you can find out what you have at wide receiver. You can go in and find out what you have on defense and see how new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles implements his new defense, his scheme, how the guys kind of take to it and how they handle it. Because there is, there's a lot of conversation about the defense taking a little bit to build up to what it can be under Jim Knowles. I don't think that'll be that much of the case. I think that's probably on some level a little bit of excuse making from teams that start slow and struggle in those games, but it will take time. And I think these are kind of the perfect types of games that they have where they can kind of ramp up, because right after that ramp up, they have the second biggest game of the year against Oregon. And so I think they need to find out a lot those first 3 weeks. What do you think is the biggest thing we're going to learn during this, as we're going to call it, the preseason?
Yeah, that's a good question. During this next 3-week window, I'm with you on Jim Knowles and the learning curve, but I want to see how they look, right? I think we can think back to last year with Tom Allen's defense and Bowling Green, and that was a game, that first half, that raised a lot of eyebrows. And you say,
learned some
okay,
stuff.
we learned some things. And some of those themes held true later in the year, right? You look at the defense and some of the big plays surrendered. So you have that. So I do think it matters how they look during these games. But you have the Knowles defense and you have, okay, how can they get up to speed? Can they lock in? What do some of these rotations look like? But on the other side of the ball, the thing that I think is most important for this team is that backup quarterback spot. And I think it's going to be Ethan Grunkemeyer. I wrote that earlier this week. James Franklin told us on Monday that they were going to talk to Ethan Grunkemeyer and Jackson Smolik and have that conversation with both of those guys Monday night. So we'll see Penn State on the practice field Wednesday. So we'll have a very good idea then who's QB2 and who's QB3. But you need to see how both of these guys look, because James Franklin said it's, not a wide margin separating QB2 from QB3, because if Drew Aller gets hurt, you're going to need somebody. I mean, we saw it last year at Wisconsin with Bo Pribula. I think also when you kind of take this bigger picture and you zoom out a little bit, 2026 is the quarterback on the roster, right? Like we're going to start to get a feel for that here during these next 3 games.
Yeah, and I think that is that's going to be interesting to see how they handle it, right? Like, is this a situation like it was with Drew Aller when he was backing up Sean Clifford, where they have those kind of designated reps for him and he's getting in, for a series no matter what, or are they waiting till it's a blowout? Which, truth be told, shouldn't take too long against Villanova, FIU, and Nevada. But still, it'll be curious to see how James Franklin handles it. He's not one to pull his starters early, right? He's always wanted to leave those guys in, let them handle the situation, make sure the game is completely in hand, and then go to the backups. But I think he's done a better job in recent years of seeing the forest for the trees, right? Because they are no longer playing it that way, right? Aller is the best example of this. They're getting guys in, they're making sure they're ready. As he has said, there are a bunch of yellow light freshmen, meaning they don't know if they're going to burn their red shirt or not. This is the time to find out if those guys can play, if they can go into, the rest of the regular season and be helpful contributors then in the playoff too, because the red shirt rule changing, so you can play 4 regular season games and then the entire postseason and still redshirt is such a massive shift that it made me forget that Tyzier Denmark redshirted last year, right? I know I was recently
and Max Granville too.
Yes, and you look at the roster and you're like, they played more than 4 games. And then you realize the postseason, right? Like that doesn't count. And so I think
it was a 16-game season. Yeah.
Yes. And 4 of them don't count toward a redshirt. So theoretically you could play 8 games last year and still redshirt. And I think that might be the case again this year. You look at guys like Kobe Howard at wide receiver, that could be an option for, there are a bunch of guys on this roster that
defensive end. Yep.
Ivan Kamaju is a great example of this at defensive end where, you don't know necessarily that you're going to need to burn the red shirt. He's good enough, we think, to play early. But if they can kind of salvage it and save it and just play him, 2 of these 3 games, save him for 2 conference games, and suddenly you're good the rest of the season. And use that time in between to kind of develop, work with the scout team, continue to get better, face the starters regularly in practice, because that is a good way for these guys to get better. But yeah, I think that is kind of the centerpiece of what we're looking for here in the next few weeks. Don't forget, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can leave your comments down below and we'll answer your questions as we go. We do have a couple questions here that we're going to get to start. First things first from Harry. Are our wide receivers good enough to provide an all-around offense with a balanced attack? And I think this is the $1 million question. Audrey,
multi-million dollar.
Yes, multi-million.
Yeah. I think so. I think based off of what we've seen this preseason now, I want to put the caveat out there because I think oftentimes fans don't understand this because every team's different. It's not like we're watching an NFL training camp, right? Like we're not there every day. We're not watching scrimmages, all these kinds of things. Like we see viewing windows that are 20, 30 minutes, typically one time a week, right? So you're trying to have as many conversations with people as you can. You're trying to get as many ideas, observe what you can in those windows. But you still have to see what this team, what this program looks like in Beaver Stadium. What do they look like when they're going against guys that they don't know, right? And some of these things, James Franklin's even said it, like you won't find that out until they play somebody else. Now, I think there are reasons for optimism with this receiving core. I think you look at it and everybody knew going into the last offseason, this was the biggest weakness. This was the glaring weakness. Penn State had to go out and upgrade the position, and they did that, right? So I think, because I'm sure we've seen it the last couple of years, fans will say, oh, well, Penn State did nothing about it. They did everything they could about it this time, right? They went out, essentially flipped the room. I mean, I think your 3 best receivers are Hudson and Pena especially. And then Ross, James Franklin acknowledged, had been banged up this preseason, but he's back now. He's healthy. So that top 3, I think those are going to be your 3 starters once this gets rolling. But we do know out of the gate that Ross and Liam Clifford are going to be doing a lot of rep sharing. So that'll be something to keep an eye on this weekend. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm of the belief that Kyron Hudson, the USC transfer, had a really good preseason, strong preseason. This is a guy who I think can be that number 1 target. And I think when you go and you look at it, you say, okay, a lot of people remember Hudson as the player who makes the eye-catching grab last year against LSU. Even Drew Aller said that was what he knew Hudson for. He actually wasn't even sure it was the same guy until Hudson was there on his visit. And he was like, oh, that's the guy who made the crazy catch against LSU. So those moments are there, those flash moments from Hudson. Penn State saw it. They saw it this preseason, but it's about consistency. And I think that's the theme with this receiving core, because these guys were in the transfer portal for a reason, right? With Ross, it's a matter of you're going up, you're elevating against higher competition now. So what does that look like? Same thing with Pena coming from Syracuse. So yeah, I think there's reasons for optimism there, John, but you take Tyler Warren out of the equation and it's like, okay, this is going to look a lot different.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part of this, right? Last year they had the kind of game breaker on offense. Tyler Warren was someone you could just put him in position to succeed and he would go win you some football games. I know that, Julian Fleming's catches on fourth down and obviously Ryan Barker's field goal was what ultimately won them the USC game, but if we're being honest, they were only in it in the first place because of what Tyler Warren was doing on the field. He was dominant. He was the best player on the field on either side of the ball. He was contributing in every way possible. And like you said, they don't have that now. And I do think that the wide receivers, I think the important thing is they at least create a baseline, right? Like there's no longer I don't think, well, I would hope not for Penn State fans' sake. I don't think there's any Orange Bowl game where they go without a catch, right? Like I would think this group is significantly better than that. Good enough to be an 11 personnel with one running back, one tight end, and 3 wide receivers the majority of the time if they want to be. Not saying they're going to be. They're going to run a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends just because that's what Andy Kotelnicki likes to do, and he has some chess pieces at tight end once again. But I just believe that this wide receiver group is different. You mentioned Hudson, who's obviously had a big spring and had a big summer to kind of step up and become a potential number 1 option. I still believe in Devontae Ross. You mentioned the bumps and bruises James Franklin talked about. I would venture to guess that he's not at full strength until the Oregon game, and that these few, as we call it, the preseason games are a good opportunity to kind of get him acclimated to getting hit again, to being on the field and those kind of contentious moments, I guess, and splitting reps with Liam Clifford. I will be curious to see how long that goes, right? Is that just a first 3 games because Ross isn't as healthy as you want him to be, or is it for the entirety of the season because Clifford steps up? Because I think there's a world where Ross is the best wide receiver of this group. I think there's a world where he's their big play threat. He's their game breaker. He's the one that's making the big plays that changes games. He might be the punt returner at the end of the day too, because he's so electric in the open field. He's great at creating space. I just think he has a chance and potentially the most upside to, by the time January rolls around and we're talking about this team in the college football playoff, once again, deep into a playoff run, is the guy having those big games and winning them these big moments that they need to go on and potentially win a national title.
Yeah, and to round out that top 6 in the receiving core, you've got Kobe Howard that you mentioned earlier, John, as the freshman that James said they're really close to greenlighting Howard, but they want to see more from him on special teams.
This feels like he's calling him out a little bit to contribute 100%. On special teams, to step it up.
Yeah, and it's also, and this is where I think you can look at it one of 2 ways. Is it a good sign that Kobe Howard is in your top 6, or is it a sign of where's the rest of the depth in that receiving core, right? I think that's kind of in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I think it's impressive that you get Howard in here, and he's from a big-time high school program, so you look at that. I think that often factors in when you got guys that are coming from big-time programs. It's a little bit easier to make that transition to this level of competition. So you have that, and Tyseer Denmark is the other guy. When you talk about that 6 deep, I like Denmark's upside a lot. It was something that I was hoping we'd see a little bit more last year of. And so, yeah, I mean, they've got 6 guys that they feel pretty good about. But again, I mean, injuries, depth, developing it. I mean, you've got all these guys behind that top 6 that, to me, we're going to get a better look of that here in the next month of what's that next wave of players, right? Who are those guys? Like, we know Caden Saunders is hurt, so he's not a factor because that's somebody that I know often comes to mind from a lot of fans. But you have to kind of parse through this and say, okay, if this was a true 3 deep at wide receiver, what would that look like? And we don't know that yet. We know what the 2 deep is. And John, I'm going to brag a little bit on here. I correctly predicted the top 6 over on Inside the Lions. I went Sunday and said, all right, I think these are the top 6 receivers. Now we'll see how close or not close I am to projecting the rest of the depth chart. It's out there, but we did get some answers from James Franklin this week on some competition battles and those kinds of things. And I think that's the other part for these next 3 games. It does not matter who starts as much as what the snap counts look like. I think that is often a big misconception of, oh, this guy started and wow, like, sure, it's an honor to start. The guy earned the right, as we often hear James Franklin say. But the truth lies in how many snaps did these people play? Like, that's where you really get the answers.
Yeah, and I think these first few weeks may not be as indicative just because there will be extra rotation.
Mhm.
But I think by the end of the third game that we'll start to see, Devontae Ross maybe he's getting a few more snaps than Liam Clifford, and they're all earlier in the game, or maybe Clifford is getting more snaps, but they're all in the second half now, right? Like I think there will be the little details in that we're able to find and determine, like, okay, what is the actual top 3 here? What is the actual, 4 through 6? And is anyone from that 7 to 9 range going to step up and make themselves a part of the competition? Because one of the things Franklin said in his press conference about the wide receivers that I thought was really interesting was that they're going to talk about this still, but Hudson and Pena, Trevor Pena, of course, coming in from Syracuse, might be tap players, meaning they stay in the game until they can, right? Until they're exhausted, they tap their helmet.
Tap out.
Yeah, they tap out of the game, and then either Kobe Howard or Tysier Denmark comes in. If that's the case, I think it's a pretty clear sign that those top 3 and 4, if you want to include Clifford, are head and shoulders above the rest, that they really needed this wide receiver turnover. And then it might be another year until you see kind of some of the fruits of the recruiting that they've done recently at the position, come to fruition and be major contributors. Because I think right now, I honestly, it's a good sign, of course, that Hudson and Pena are tap players and are good enough to be starters. But I don't know that that's necessarily the best sign for those depth pieces. You can name seemingly 10 different receivers in that group, guys like Lyric Samuel, Matthew Otten. There are a bunch of them. Yeah, yep. Jeff Exeter, redshirt sophomores that haven't contributed yet, but are working their way there. And so I'm curious to see how much that group plays and if any of them can take a step forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where you really get opportunities to see. And I think, too, and we hear this a lot from James Franklin, that when they scrimmage in Beaver Stadium, that players look different, right? Like sometimes when the lights come on, so to speak, some players perform better. They're just better in games than they are in practices. And I'm sure for a coach that has to be maddening because you want that consistency. But I think that's just the reality of it. And since I mentioned Beaver Stadium, John, I guess I'll toss this out there. That is one of the other things that I am most looking forward to this weekend, is seeing what the venue looks like during this renovation, right? We know that they're going to pause the renovation Thursday night to get ready for Saturday. And then come Sunday, they keep on working. Like that's going to be, you're going to see portions of the concourse that are going to be walled off because of the renovation. So I think that's a really big point of this preseason not preseason, these first few weeks.
It's the preseason.
This whatever way to call this next almost month till Oregon comes here. You're going to get a chance to see what this looks like and what are some of these upgrades. And I think, again, John and I both live here in the area, and so you get to see this renovation unfold year round. But for people who have season tickets or you come to 1 or 2 games a year, it's going to look noticeably different when you come to town on Saturday or Friday, or if you're rolling in an RV on Thursday, you're definitely going to see that. So I think that for sure is something else just to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how people react to kind of, it's a little bit steeper on the west side of the stadium now, and also not nearly as steep as it's going to be when it's finished. Steep enough that I will not be going up there. I promise you that, as someone who's afraid of heights. It's not something I'm
going to do. Go on, John. You're not going to walk to the top?
Absolutely not. But it is like a safe, sturdy structure. There's been a lot of consternation about that. We spoke with Penn State Athletic Director Pat Kraft last week about that, and he dispelled some of the consternation and the apprehension about what this was going to be like for fans on the west side. It seems to be a safe structure. It had to be certified by every sort of governing body you can think of that has to certify those types of things. This is. And Kraft mentioned this. These are not like rollaway bleachers that they're putting up there.
You're not in a high school gymnasium. Yeah.
Yes, this is an actual construction project where they have to go about these things in that way. So I am curious too to see how fans kind of react to it, how it kind of goes, how the circulation is within the stadium too, because I think that'll be interesting to see how like fans move about, because it is going to be a little bit different this year. Some of that west side being under construction still, and there will be a temporary wall there that fans can't get to. As you astutely asked Pat Kraft about, if you drop your keys, someone will get them for you. But it's going to be it sounds like it's going to be hard to drop them down there at the very least.
If you drop your keys or phone, this was one of the questions I heard the most on the renovation. If you're sitting on that west side and you drop your keys or phone in those bleachers, what happens to them? Like, do they just, is there a netting underneath? They just fall away? I had someone send me a photo. This was in the last 24, 48 hours, sent me a photo. They're part of the construction project on that west side. And I inspected with my eyes myself on the phone, and I was like, yeah, it looks like a pretty tight gap. So I don't think you're going to have to worry about losing items. But if you somehow, maybe you have too many beverages and your phone somehow slips through the crack, Penn State says that they will have someone there. I'm not sure who, but someone will be there to man the area and get you your items back.
Yes, and this construction project is going to go on again next offseason. So expect more, temporary type situations in 2026 for the 2026 season, and then 2027's off season prior to the 2027 season, I should say. It should all wrap up in time for the 2027 season. But continuing
2 years from now, right? 2 years from now, everything should be done.
When things are going to look a lot different for Penn State, both on and off the field with the construction project. But on the field, this is a program that has been generally built with recruiting, right? Like we've seen most of the highest end talent on this roster is guys that they brought in and they kept here and that they retained. It's not a massive portal team, despite us just spending all that time talking about the wide receivers and how they brought 3 of them in to turn the room over. That is generally not James Franklin's MO at Penn State. That is not how they go about things. And I want to take this to another question we got from Charles about Penn State's recruiting and where they rank moving forward, right? And this 2026 class, the one that's coming in, so they will join for next season, is one that I think is maybe not as heralded as some of the other groups that we've seen in the past, right? This is not like the Drew Aller class that is currently rounding out its final season with, guys like Dennis Sutton at the top of the depth chart as one of the best defensive ends in the country, and Zane Durant as potentially the best defensive tackle in the country. But it's a group that has high-end talent, right? You have guys like Kevin Brown from in-state as an offensive tackle that is a physical freak that I think might be able to come in and contribute pretty quickly for someone at that position.
He certainly looks it, yeah.
Yes. You have wide receiver help in Davion Brown. You have a linebacker in Terry Wiggins that can come in is a good athlete. But I want to talk to you most about the quarterback in question here, because that is always going to be the question here. And you mentioned earlier that the 2026 quarterback might not be on the roster. That's not putting pressure, to be clear, on 2026 commit Troy Hune. But it does say, I think, that things will open up next year. Do you see him as someone who can contribute, maybe not in his freshman year, but potentially as a redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore to start at Penn State?
Yeah, I think there's a high ceiling there. I had the opportunity last year ahead of the USC game. I went to Troy's high school in San Marcos, California, which geographically he's not far from Carlsbad. So that is, I can say with certainty, the only time I've done a recruiting story with a Penn State commit in Carlsbad. So that was fun. But yeah, I mean, I think it is that there's the upside with him, and you look at kind of the leadership. That's what I find fascinating whenever Penn State's recruited a quarterback and doing the jobs that John and I do. You get to know these players, and that means calling them on the phone. And I never conduct interviews via text, right? Like that's not how we do things. I got to talk to somebody. That's why oftentimes you want to show up to their school, get to know them, have a conversation with them. And how quarterbacks conduct themselves often is interesting to me. It's also notable because more often than not, they seemingly are more mature than their peers, right? And they understand that the spotlight's going to be on them because it's on them at their high schools. They're used to it. They're comfortable with it. I mean, I remember going back quite a few years when Sean Clifford was being recruited and talking to Sean on the phone. And, you're talking to a high school kid, but he was just mature beyond his years. Same thing with Drew Aller when you go to his school. Like I did the same thing with Ethan Grunkemeyer. I talked with Small. Like all these guys, you want to try and get a feel for what are their strengths And are they leaders? Are they people that teammates are going to gravitate toward? I absolutely got that impression from Troy last year. I mean, this is somebody who comes from a sporting family. His mom is a high school basketball coach, right? So you have that angle to it. He was actually at the USC game last year, and I think it's notable that Penn State gets a commitment from a Southern California guy, especially when you have Mr. Lincoln Riley not far away, right? It's the quarterback whisperer, that kind of thing. Like, that's a significant win. I would be willing to bet, if I was a betting woman, that Penn State, when they go out to UCLA this year, that they will be spending a lot of time checking in with Troy and making sure things are good. I do not know right now. I still need to check in with him. If early enrollment is something that's on the table. I mean, sometimes for like context, some high schools don't allow it, but Penn State, we've seen a lot of success. These guys that get into programs early. You look at this year, a couple guys that they're projecting to play. Darius Dixon from Mater Dei High School, not too far away from out in Southern California. He was able to get in the winter. And yeah, I think to get back to your original point, John, about Troy, I think you're looking at it and you say, this is someone that you have to feel pretty good about. Now, how does he grasp this offense? Is it this offense? Is Andy Kotelnicki here the next year, right? Like, I think that's the other layer of this.
Question. Yeah. And it's whether or not Kotelnicki is the one calling plays, is the one scheming it up, because I think you and I both anticipate that he will be a big-time candidate for a head coaching job in 2026. You never know how these things will go. He was a candidate at some places, after one season at Penn State. You would have to think that after a season that we both anticipate being a little more successful this year, that they will, that those other schools will come calling and will want to hire him. But you never know, right? And that can change things on the quarterback front too. And I do think you're right, though. I think the thing with Troy is the upside, right? Some of that untapped potential. There's some growth that needs to be done there. He's not someone that I anticipate, playing in 2026. To be clear, like, I think he's going to take some time to develop. But once he does, I think there's a clear starter level player there. And you mentioned that leadership too, and you're right. We both went and talked to Aller and Grunkemeyer, and that was like oozing from Aller. I remember, like the sort of the leadership that you could tell that guys just kind of gravitate toward him, the competitor that he is. People talk about his emotions all the time, but he is just that competitive. He always wants to win. But I think if you're looking for that next Aller type class, you're probably looking at 2027 when Penn State already has 4 commits, all 4 in the top 100 and most recruiting sites. And Keemon Spell, who's, I think there's some social media buzz about him currently. Yes, because there are schools trying to flip him and he seems to be semi-interested in doing so. But if he comes to Penn State, he might be their next all-time great running back if he stays long enough. You have Leighton Van Brandt at offensive tackle, who's a high upside player, Gabe Jenkins at cornerback, Khalil Taylor at wide receiver, 3 guys that are in state, which is always a good sign for Penn State. When you have those kind of, Pennsylvania high-level recruiting classes, they're just going to do better because they tend to dip into that region quite a bit, into this region, I should say, quite a bit, and the surrounding states. But I do think that is kind of the next – if you're looking for the next cornerstone class, the next one that can, that you look at and say, oh, this team can really do everything that, national title teams do. I think that's the group you're talking about.
Here's where I think we're just at an interesting spot in the sport as a whole. I think when you look at it and you say, okay, like and it's got to be tough for fans because you want to get excited about these future recruiting classes and all this. Well, the reality is, how many of these players, one, are going to stay committed to Penn State or any school in this time frame, right? If you're a 2027 commit, that is a long time to stay committed to one place, yes. Right? Then once you get here, if you get here, assuming you get to that point, are you on this roster after your first year here, or are you in the transfer portal going somewhere else, right? Like, that's just the reality.
And maybe coming back a year later like King Mac did.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reality of this sport right now, and I think that's where as a fan, I think it'd probably be easier to get less wrapped up in recruiting rankings and more so say, okay, what about, this guy in the transfer portal? I mean, you look at it, right? Like, I remember the recruitment of Anai White, and you look at it and fans were freaking out because he goes to Texas A&M. You look at Nolan Ritchie. I remember the panic that went off when he commits to Wisconsin. And I went to Nolan's high school before his commitment. talked with them, did this whole thing, and it's like, how does Penn State not get a kid whose family is season tickets, who are Penn State through and through, all this whole thing? Well, look at how it ends up. Both of them are back here now on the roster. I think it's just the way the sport is changing. But to Penn State's credit, because you hit on it before earlier, John, they're never going to be totally built through the transfer portal. They want to use the portal to supplement and to fill needs when they arise, like they've done in the receiving core, like we've seen them do along the defensive line quite a bit. Couple offensive linemen here and there, we've seen it.
AJ Harris, another good example of this, by the way, is someone who I think people forget came in the portal from Georgia.
Yes.
Because he didn't do a ton at Georgia and then had a breakout year last year for Penn State.
Yeah, and the fact that Penn State has relationships with these guys that date back to their recruitments, that's why they've been in the game with all of these transfers, right? So, like, you're looking at, okay, what can you do as a coaching staff to build those relationships now, but then maintain them once these guys don't pick your program, if that's the case, because in this day and age, they might come back. And yeah, you hit on it with King Mack. It's a perfect example of somebody that comes here, plays as a freshman, transfers to Alabama. King Mack even told us himself this preseason, yeah, the grass isn't always greener. Goes to Alabama, is back on Penn State's campus in the winter. And he's like, yeah, he got his old locker back, his old roommate back. Somebody that we're going to see returning kicks with Nick Singleton this year. That was an interesting development this week, but makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, again, I think you have to take the totality of these recruiting classes, but also take the transfer portal into account too.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that Penn State can develop talent too, right? Someone like Zakee Wheatley, who started out as a corner and is now, I would argue, one of the 10 or so best safeties in the country, if not, an even tighter group at the top there. They have a way of getting these guys on campus and then maximizing whatever they have in them, right? Like Anthony Donko was seen as a guard-only prospect, and then all of a sudden we're talking about him as an elite tackle, and now he's moving potentially back to guard, where we expect him to excel again as one of the better interior offensive linemen in the country. And I think maybe next year he could move right back to tackle and be one of the best in the country at that too. We've seen time and time again they take this talent and maybe that isn't necessarily a 5-star talent, but that low end 4-star, high end 3-star, and develop them into quality starters and all conference level players, which is, I think, as long as James Franklin is the head coach at Penn State, that's going to be how they get, the most talent out of their roster.
Yeah, and I think the offensive line is a really great example of it. You mentioned it with Donko. The job that Phil Trautwein has done with this group, I mean, it's remarkable. And I think, I've covered these guys for a long time. This is my 16th season, which is really bizarre because I swear I'm not that old. 16th season and I'm 35. The math does not add up, I'll admit.
It does not.
But that's how it works when you start covering this team when you're a student. And so I've seen a lot of this offensive line, and there were a lot of not great moments during the sanction era and the scholarship limitations. And, Penn State fans certainly remember that Temple game with Christian Hackenberg and the 10 sacks and trying to rebuild this thing. I mean, it's taken a lot of time. It's taken a lot of different coaches, a lot of different personnel, a lot of different thought processes. And they're at the point now where we maybe are talking about this as an offensive line that's potentially as good as, or at least in the same conversation with the 1994 group. And that's a story that I'm working on this week, is digging in and what do some of those 94 guys think about that? Are they okay with that? Are they not? Because when you look at it and you say, okay, like the fact that there is a link, there is a relationship between players on the 94 team and this team, that speaks to the culture of your program. And that speaks to, the fact that James Franklin has made it a point of emphasis to make sure a lot of these lettermen are included, right? And it's always a matter of, hey, like, this is your program. You're the guys who poured into it. So I think that's remarkable when you kind of look at the generations that have spanned. But yeah, I mean, you look at an offensive line that is 7, 8 deep right now. These are not conversations that we were having 5, 6, 7, certainly not 10 years ago.
Yeah, they absolutely were not. And this is an offensive line that is good enough to help this team win a national championship. And I think that is the most important thing here. And I think this is a good place to get into our season predictions, what we expect to happen before we wrap up today. I will cede the floor to you. What do you expect this team to do when it's all said and done?
We're really easing into it, aren't we? I have Penn State projected to go 11-1 in the regular season. I do not have that one loss being to Oregon or Ohio State, which is bold. I'm sure some will say. Um, I'm projecting a weird fluky loss at Iowa because
I was
Kinnick
going to say I'm
Stadium.
staring right at Iowa. Yeah.
It's been a house of horrors for Penn State. It is a tough place to play. I've been there countless times to cover games, and your sideline, I mean, the fans are on top of you. I mean, there's just been over the years, there's been so many, which is kind of one of the things that I think it's lost in the Big Ten, is that there have been some really good Penn State Iowa games. Going, even back when I was a student, and Adrian Claiborne and the blocked punt and all those moments that Penn State fans do not want to remember. So I will brush right past them. But so I am projecting that as the one loss. So I do have Penn State making the Big Ten title game. I have them winning the Big Ten title game. I have them as the number 2 seed in the playoff, which means they're getting a bye. I have them going all the way back to Miami, which is the site of the national championship game. And is that where I leave it, John? Or
I don't know, how many hearts do you want to break with this next sentence?
Yeah. Again, it takes a lot of luck to win a national championship. Like John and I talked about early on, once you get to that game, I'll give it this caveat. Once you get to that game, anything can happen.
All bets are off.
Yeah, I mean, you're there, you have the chance. Just because I have not seen Penn State win a national championship in my lifetime, I'm going to say, sure, they'll get there, but I'll pick Texas to beat them just because who knows, right? But once you're there, all bets are off. So that's how far I have them going. John, what about you?
Yeah. See, I made you go first to kind of soften the blow of how devastating I think.
Yeah. So kind to your guest on here, yeah.
Yeah, right. The outcome that I expect, which is 11-1 with a loss at Ohio State, which I think is a pretty reasonable loss, and then avenging it in the Big Ten title game.
Nice.
To become a top 4 seed and get a bye, beat South Carolina in the second round, beat Notre Dame to avenge the semifinal loss, and then get a rubber match against Ohio State in the national title game, where I feel like I should leave that on a cliffhanger to not upset anybody. But I will say that I think Ohio State wins a second straight national title. They're so talented. But like you said, this is, especially in this scenario, if it's the third matchup between those two teams, nobody knows that Ohio State offense better than Jim Knowles, outside of the Ohio State building, I should say. And I think Penn State will have as good of a chance as any. I think there's a chance that they're the only team that beats Ohio State this year. I actually think Ohio State beats Texas in week 1 here.
Yeah, that's good. That is going to be a fun one to watch.
Yes, and I think it's going to be fun to see how different it looks if it happens again, like if those two teams meet up in the playoff, because teams change so much across the 4 months. And we'll see, like, if Penn State's receivers go out there and prove that they're not just like, baseline level, that they're really good or dare I say great, then I think that could easily change my opinion, right? I need to see more out of their weapons that aren't the running backs to know that to believe that they can win a national title. I think that is a good place to leave it, though. We have devastated enough people with those 2 projections.
Hey, we can be wrong. That's the beauty of this, right?
Right. I mean, hey,
we can very much be wrong.
Birth in the national title game. It's pretty good. But if you'd like to read Audrey's work, you can find it at insidethelions.substack.com. Go and subscribe there. You can find her on Twitter at Audrey Snyder 4 and on Blue Sky if you search Audrey Snyder. You can, of course, find me at the Center Daily Times on centerdaily.com, where you can subscribe as well. On Twitter at John Sauber, and on Blue Sky if you search John Sauber. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.